Herve was doing well in Ivory Coast. He was making enough money, he was leading a regular life with his loved ones, but the urge to have more, the urge to make more money, his dream to give his family a better life, led him to the path that turned out to be the most horrific incident of his life. He looked at people moving to Europe and suddenly becoming rich. He wanted to experience that magic. His dream came true. He left the Ivory Coast to move abroad, but it was not to Europe, but to Kuwait. Before leaving his land, he had no idea that was being trafficked to Kuwait. His dream to become something, to give his family a better life, made him accessible to someone overseas who would put a price tag on him. But risking his life, Herve made it out of the country where someone owned him and eventually wanted to kill him.
Je suis traumatisé.
I was so traumatized that I feared my boss might be there. Sometimes while working, I would hear gunshots. He wanted me to understand that if I resisted, he would not hesitate to kill me.
But how did Herve save his life? How did he survive in Kuwait when he was trying to run away? Moreover, when Herve wanted to move to Europe, how did he end up in Kuwait? We have many questions, and only Herve can answer them all. So in this episode, let's find out the whole story from the man himself. Before we begin, let us tell you that this story is not going to be easy. So, let's brace ourselves. I am Simon Greenwood, and you are awesome. Let's get started.
Je suis Herve Ndri.
Hello, I'm Herve, a former migrant and victim of human trafficking in Kuwait in 2015. And tonight, I'm going to share a bit of my story and my experience. Without realizing it, I was sold as a slave in the 21st century in 2015 because I wanted to go on an adventure like any other young person today in Africa. But unfortunately for me, I came across someone I would say shady, whose actions I didn't fully understand. Through a person I knew, I was asked, "You once talked about a travel project. Is it still something you want to do?" I had nurtured the idea of traveling because at the time, the job I was doing in my country wasn't well paid. I worked in the cocoa industry, where I was the director of a cooperative. But what I earned at the time seemed insufficient. I prepared to go to Europe, telling myself that if I got a good job there with good pay, I could support my family and start a project. Once in Abidjan on a mission, I met a friend who asked me, "You once talked about a travel project. Is it still something you want to do?" I said yes. He told me that he knew someone who could help me achieve my goal. This person was someone he knew who had already helped others travel.
Des personnes que je connais.
So we contacted him and went to meet him in a neighborhood called Yopougon here in Abidjan. We talked with him, and without realizing it, in the place where we were received, I had just sealed my future. He made me believe that the countries he sent people to were Turkey, Kurdistan, and Qatar. My project was to go to Europe. I had never considered Asia, but he insisted, saying that in those countries, within 2 years of work, I could earn enough money. Speaking of Turkey, Kurdistan and Qatar, I chose Qatar based on the living conditions, work and pay he described. He told me that for the trip, I had to pay 2 million. I honestly told him I didn't have that amount. After some discussion and negotiation, he reduced the price to 1.7 million. A few weeks later, he called me to say that all the documents were ready, everything was prepared, and I could now travel since the visa was available. He asked me to prepare the rest of my money. To my surprise, this man came to meet me at my workplace in the interior of the country in Konofla. He showed me a document with the visa, but when I looked at it, I saw that it wasn't for Qatar. It was a visa for Kuwait. Not knowing much about this country, I asked him, "But what kind of country is this?" He then tried to convince me again, saying, "Listen, I tried to get a visa for Qatar, but I couldn't. The jobs there aren't well paid. Kuwait, on the other hand, is better. Over there, it will be good compared to the other side."
Herve just wanted to move out of Ivory Coast back then. He started from Europe and ended up with Kuwait. Looking at that huge country change on your visa might have panicked you. What did you do then?
He presented several arguments and insisted that the documents were already available. I believed everything he told me. He handed me a piece of paper and told me that for the trip, I had to pass through a neighboring country, Mali. There, the person who would help us travel and who had the original document was located. On August 30th, 2015, I left Ivory Coast for the first time in my life. Upon arriving in Mali, people were waiting for us. The person who had the documents was actually the boss of an agency running an illegal network to send people to the Gulf countries. On the day of departure, he was waiting for us at the airport. I was accompanied by the younger brother of my contact in Ivory Coast, and we joined other young Ivorians there. When we went through the formalities, a police officer took our passport. Seeing that we were Ivorian and that our documents showed Kuwait as the destination, he questioned us. "What are you going there for? You seem to be good young people working here. Why go to Kuwait?" We replied that we had been assured that there was work and a better life there, but he warned us. "You've made the wrong choice. Kuwait is not a good place for you. The living conditions are tough and the mistreatment of foreign workers is common."
Listening to this warning, did you think of dropping the plan to go to Kuwait?
Les postes de police.
This worried us, but we were already committed to the journey and had spent a significant amount of money should we cancel or continue. In the end, we decided to go ahead and see for ourselves what awaited us. Once there, we were assured that we would have the choice between various jobs, both in companies and as domestic workers. We were told that in addition to our main job, we could do other activities to earn more money, as is often done in Europe. The initial salary was about 300,000 CFA francs for the first 3 months. Then it would increase to 500,000 CFA francs. But when we arrived, everything changed. The person who was waiting for us at the airport first took us to pray at the mosque. I refused, explaining that I was a Christian. He insisted and then gave us books to learn how to pray. After that, he took us to a dilapidated house where we were locked in. He left with the keys and didn't return until the next day at 4 p.m. bringing us food. "Here, you will eat well, gain weight, and make a lot of money." Then he left, locking the door behind him. It wasn't until 6 p.m. that another man came to get us. One by one, we were handed over to strangers in exchange for money. When it was my turn, I was taken to a house where I met an Indian man, the family driver. He informed me that the next day he would take me to my workplace. "And where is that?" I asked. "In the desert."
I cannot even imagine how you would have felt at that moment, being surrounded by people who don't even know your language, and knowing that you are not here for what you left your home for can break a person.
On a laissé traîner.
So that's how I left. Once there, I spent a month. During that month, my employer was exemplary. Every time he came, he brought small gifts to encourage me and give me the strength to stay. Even the other workers, Indians and Sudanese, kept saying, "Your boss is kind. Among his brothers, he's the only one who's benevolent." All of this was just a way to prepare me psychologically to stay there. The first month, my boss paid me. When I converted the amount, it was about 120,000 CFA francs, or between 60 and 70 dinars. The currency fluctuated, so it could go up or down. I then called the person who had sent me from Ivory Coast to say, "This is not what you promised me. Not only are the conditions tough, but the salary is also way below what was agreed." He replied, "Be patient, we made a mistake, we will change your workplace." He did everything to reassure me.
Clearly, these people didn't want to pay Herve anything. How can a person survive in such a situation?
Vu que le mois est fini, il ne veut pas me payer.
What I didn't know was that I had to work for this family for 3 months. After this period, my contract with the intermediaries would end and I would become entirely dependent on the employer. At that point, if I had any problems, no one would intervene for me. In the second month, my employer didn't pay me. I waited, then went to see him after work to ask for my salary. He replied, "What salary? Here, you're not paid. I bought you for 400 dinars, about 800,000 CFA francs."
How can a human have the audacity to say or do such a thing?
J'ai attendu jusque-là, mais
Sometimes while working, I would hear gunshots. He wanted me to understand that if I resisted, he would not hesitate to kill me. I worked from 5 a.m. to 2 a.m. After grazing the animals, I had to cook. I had become the go-to man for everything. One day, there were about 15 or even 20 people coming to eat. I had to prepare everything alone, clear the dishes, make tea, coffee, and whenever I sat down for a moment, he would order me to do something else. Then I got sick. Even in that condition, he refused to let me see a doctor. An Ethiopian had to insist, "If you don't come get him, he will die." His son came to take me to the hospital, where I was hospitalized for 3 days. As soon as I got out, my boss ordered me to leave 50 kilograms of food for the animals, but I just got out of the hospital. He didn't care. He called his father to tell him that I was refusing to work.
How can a human be this ruthless to another human? But his father was kind to you before, right?
Baba Njimini me demande si son père est venu ici.
One day, while I was cooking, I heard an engine noise. It was his father. Thinking he was respectable, I went to greet him politely, but as soon as he got out of his vehicle, he raised his cane to hit me. I dodged, which made him even angrier. He sped off and charged at me to try to run me over. I ran and hid behind a container. He shouted, "Do you think you're worth more than my sheep? If you refuse to work, I will kill you." I realized that my life was in danger. Luckily, I hadn't come alone to this country. A friend with whom I had traveled called me. He asked how things were going. I told him everything. He said, "I was warned about this country and how workers are treated. With your story, I will escalate the information." He had just created a WhatsApp group, and that's how he shared the information. He offered to help me get out of there. He asked for my GPS location, which I sent him, but since the escape couldn't happen immediately, we had to wait a week before attempting anything.
Looks like some unknown power was looking after him in the dungeon of hell.
Donc je prends la fuite, mon ami là m'appelle.
The night before my departure, the man still wanted to show me some work to do. I understood that it was just a way to exhaust me and keep me under his control. He had already exploited me by sending me to clean up an abandoned site where we did livestock farming. Then he wanted me to build toilets and do other work unrelated to the reason he had brought me there. As soon as he found out I had the masonry skills, he started giving me all kind of tasks during my free time. And since the month was coming to an end and he didn't want to pay me, he set conditions. If I refused to do this task, he planned to withhold my salary, claiming I hadn't completed the requested task. And worse, I feared he would use that as an excuse to hurt me or even kill me. So I decided to escape the night before. I called my friend, the driver, to tell him I wouldn't stay there overnight and that he had to come get me.
How did you feel when you were there?
Franchement, étant dans le désert,
Honestly, from the first day when I realized I was sent to work in the desert, I understood the horror of my situation. When the man told me he had bought me for 450 dinars and could do whatever he wanted with me, I made a decision. Either I died there or if I returned to Cote d'Ivoire, I would take him to court. I couldn't get justice on my own, but I intended to have him arrested and judged for what he had made me go through. But meanwhile, he was telling my family something else. "I sent your son, your brother, but when he got there, he didn't want to work. He wants to ruin my business. Yes, it's hard, but with time, everything will be fine. He just refuses to understand." He told everyone I was a bushman who came to sabotage his work. Those words made me furious. While I struggled to survive, he had the nerve to talk about his business. So I kept my decision to escape. I had shared my GPS location with my friend, the driver. But on the day of my escape, the phone containing that information was dead. I had only a small phone for calling. He tried to follow the first location I sent him, but along the way, he ran into a camp guarded by armed men. It was impossible to get through. He called me. Honestly, I can't go any further. If you can walk until you see light or reach the city, do it. It's your only chance. There was no other choice. I decided to walk on foot starting at 7 p.m. in the middle of the night. I lived with a Sudanese man who was watching me. To successfully escape, I made a plan. I prepared a meal with a lot of salt, hoping he would find it inedible and go to see his brother, who lived 1 kilometer away, but unfortunately, he liked the meal. Then he said to me, "Your phone is dead, you should go charge it at my brother's." At that moment, I saw an opportunity. "Will he come back here?" I asked him. "No, he won't come back until tomorrow." While he was talking, I took my suitcase, hid it under my blanket, put my bag on my back, and quietly left. An inner voice told me, "You just signed your death warrant. If they catch you, they will kill you." I ran. Then I slowed down to walk. Meanwhile, the Sudanese man wasn't calling me, probably thinking I went to charge my phone. I kept walking in the desert. It was pitch dark. My friend, the driver, was calling me to guide me. "Head toward the light. If you reach the city, I can pick you up." At times, when vehicle passed and their headlights shone on me, I would drop to the ground and crawl to avoid being seen. In the desert, there were tents everywhere. The same Koreans who exploited us sometimes retreated there to avoid the heat. I had to dodge these camps, ignore the barking dogs, and navigate around 4x4s parked in the shadows. It was a real miracle.
Not many people can do what Herve did. People just give in to the situation, but he wanted to his life another try. He didn't care even if his life was at stake then.
Moi, ma vie en danger là-bas. Toi, tu parles de...
I walked like this until I reached the paved road, the light. Then I hid. My small phone, which I used only to communicate with the young man in charge of picking me up, was dead. It now showed a low battery, ready to shut down. I thought, if the phone dies here and I can't meet this man, my life will really be in danger. So I prayed that the battery would last until he found me. I arrived and hid in the dark. I called him to tell him where I was. Since there were several vehicles and a large expressway, I asked him to turn on his hazard lights. That way, I could identify him more easily. He did. I spotted his vehicle from a distance and then gave him my location so he could come pick me up. He arrived with a Togolese man who was his co-driver. They took me aboard and we left. When they came, the Togolese man asked where my things were. I replied that I had thrown them away. He wanted to know exactly where, but I refused to tell him. For me, there was no question of going back to get them and risking my life for a suitcase. We had to leave this place as quickly as possible. The man could already be worried about my absence and call his brother to check if I was still there. If he noticed my departure, he would alert his bosses and they would start looking for me. We were all scared and overwhelmed by the situation. Even the driver in shock couldn't find his way home. Thanks to the Togolese man's GPS, we finally managed to orient ourselves. At one point, as we were approaching the driver's house, he said, "If we pass this checkpoint without encountering any police, we're safe. But if they are there, for sure, the three of us will end up in prison." We continued with our hearts racing. When we arrived, he saw that the police weren't there. We went inside. But when it was time to get out of the vehicle, I was scared. I didn't want to step out. He reassured me, saying, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you. You're safe here." I was so traumatized that I feared my boss might be there. He assured me that he didn't know my boss and that I was in no danger. He offered me to stay the night and look for another job the next day.
Some incidents break you so deep that a human lose trust in other humans, it is a direct attack on humanity itself. However, was everything fine with you after you made it out of there?
Donc j'ai fait 2 jours, 3 jours, j'étais caché là.
I stayed there for 3 days. On the 3rd day, another Ivorian who worked in a security company contacted me. He offered to pick me up by taxi to introduce me to his boss. He wanted to help me join his company. Unfortunately, this man, may he rest in peace, passed away after I left the country. He was the one who helped me get a job as a security guard. He insisted that I be assigned to a place where my former boss couldn't find me.
I cannot imagine how it would feel to always live in fear. Anyone can kill you anywhere in a foreign land, and no one will care. How did you make it back home?
Fait partie de la police, sont en train de mener les gens.
The police asked for our papers. I had nothing on me except a copy of a document belonging to a Nigerian who had helped me get the job, but I preferred not to show it to avoid causing trouble for him. I was then arrested and taken to the police station, then to prison awaiting deportation. We stayed there for 2 weeks. One day, an Egyptian approached me and asked if anyone had come to see me. I said no. He then advised me to negotiate with the police or else I would stay locked up for a long time. I followed his advice and called the police officer through the bars. When he came, I told him everything I had been through in the desert. He asked for my boss's number to ask him to bring my passport, but my boss refused, and worse, he was negotiating with the police to send me back to the desert where I had fled from. At that moment, I remembered the Togolese man I had escaped with. They had interrogated him about me, but he had pretended not to know where I was. However, we were still in contact. Unfortunately, he was eventually caught as well. One day, when he refused to perform a task because of the cold, his boss called in some police colleagues. They came at night, beat him until he was left bleeding, then abandoned him where I had fled. They had planned to finish him off the next morning, but he also managed to escape that night. Meanwhile, I was locked up and my boss was negotiating to send me back to the desert. It was a one-way ticket to death. I told the police that where I arrived, I would never go back there unless it's to my country. They replied, "In your country, there is no desert." I retorted, "No, my country does not have a desert." They asked, "What is your country?" I replied, "Ivory Coast." They said they didn't know Ivory Coast. They mentioned Saraj as a Mao, but they weren't familiar with it. I thought, what can I say to make him understand where I'm from? A voice in my head told me, "Tell him you come from Drogba's country. At least he knows that." I said, "I come from Drogba's country." They responded, "Drogba, the one who plays football for Chelsea?" I confirmed, "Yes, that's him." They asked, "You're from the same country? Are you his brother?" I answered, "What brought me here? If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't be here." That's when he told me, "All right, B, you have to leave." I left, and he added, "Since you don't have any papers, I will help you. They will register you, identify you, then we will see about a pass with your embassy. If we pay for the ticket, you can go back home."
Wow, Drogba doesn't even know he has saved a person from horror. However, that was a smart move.
Et j'arrive en passant par...
I arrived in Ivory Coast in April 2016. At the airport, the migration police took me and asked why I had been repatriated. I explained everything I had been through, and they said my story was too important for them not to forward it to the commissioner. After listening to my account, he called other officers and they decided to send me to the DST. The DST is the Ivorian police specialized in investigations, especially those related to passports and the fight against human trafficking networks. After filing my report, they released me and I went home.
How did everyone at home react after having you back?
En tout cas, ma famille était contente de me voir.
My family was happy to see me, although some weren't happy that I had returned without having earned money or achieved my goals there. But what mattered was that I was safe home. When I came back, everything had to start over because I had lost everything when I left. I had no job and I had to find work. Finally, a friend found me a job for 11 months in the industrial zone of Yopougon. There, I began sharing my experience with my colleagues to raise awareness among the youth about not falling into the same trap. An uncle encouraged me to write a book about my experience. So, I wrote Migrants Turned into Slaves: How Drogba Saved Me. Thanks to this book, I found the courage to create an NGO to raise awareness among African youth, especially Ivorians, about the illegal trafficking of migrant and human trafficking. Since the NGO's creation on November 2nd, 2017, we have saved thousands of lives. I've given interviews and our awareness campaigns have reached millions of views. When people were imprisoned in Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, or even Kuwait, they would call me for help. Thanks to the NGO, we were able to save lives and help many people, including the sick, girls with cancer or cervical cancer, whom we evacuated to their home countries.
Some things happen to you for a purpose. Maybe all of this happened to Herve because it was destined for him to save the people who were going through the same human trafficking brutality that he went through. What happened to Herve should not happen to anyone. I repeat, anyone. Some incidents leave scars so deep that no matter how much you talk about it or vent about it, the pain stays. I wish Herve will one day get over the monstrosity he has faced only because he dreamt big. Herve is an inspiration for people to never give up on themselves. No matter how hard the situation gets, the man ditched the death. Now it's our turn to do justice to Herve by sharing his story with as many people as possible. I count on you for that. I am Simon Greenwood, and this is Afrimax English. Remember to subscribe.